All right, it's Deep Stacks number 21. We're moving on into the 20s here. We want to do Dave Alvin this week. Every week we struggle to choose which person. We always have three, four, five people and artists that we want to talk about. But Dave Alvin kind of rose to the front of the line this week. The album that I'm most really obsessed with, I've kind of listened to it. It's one of those records that I've listened to in several different periods of my life and have just always come back to it. And also, like as often the case with Deep Stacks, I've kind of learned and discovered new things about it this week, getting into liner notes, which is always kind of a great side effect for me, is just, looking stuff up more deeply. The album is Ashgrove. The artist is Dave Alvin. You're going to give us a little bit of a background on his history with a band called the Blasters, which is really should probably be in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. I mean, they're kind of, if you made a family tree of rock music or American music, as we were talking about before we started, the difference between American music and Americana music and how that Americana term kind of came along later. And Dave Alvin has a great song with that American phrase prior to the Americana term. He's on Yep Rock Records. Ashgrove came out in 2004. His entire catalog is really, really cool. I don't want to try and describe his music too much with words like we always do because it's a slippery slope, but I would say it's bluesy, kind of rootsy. Has kind of a little bit of a Crazy Horse garage rock vibe in some places. It also has like country overtones. There's pedal steel on Ashgrove as well. There's some beautiful, quiet, very literally almost Townes Van Zandt-ish kind of. There's a really cool song on it called Everett Ruess that we'll talk about. We were actually both of us kind of struggling to think of a comparable album that we could use as kind of a reference. With that little introduction aside, give us some background on Dave Alvin, maybe when you first encountered him, and what you think of Ashgrove when you first heard that. Dave Alvin.
Whew. I mean, you set it up nice, and it's all true. Dave Alvin, I mean, in terms of first encounters, it's clearly the Blasters for me and lots of us music fans. They came out of a gargantuan, huge pot of stew of rockabilly, early primitive rock and roll. Just
who were some of the heroes of the Blasters, like Chuck?
What's that?
Who were some of the heroes of the Blasters, like Chuck Berry, or who would you say?
A whole bunch of different people. The old blues guys, the rockabilly greats. New Orleans music. They came out of California, and there's kind of a whole vibe about California blues. I mean, there's people who can go on for days and have written books, I'm sure, about the Chicago sound, the Texas blues, the Piedmont blues. But there is definitely kind of a thing about the California blues, and I love it. It's much more of it's got a little more swing to it. It's not, to me, quite the same as the just slamming, sort of swagger, macho Chicago blistering thing. It's got that sort of that finesse and that shuffle and that swing to it, the Los Angeles blues thing. It's kicking. And, and Los Lobos kind of appeared out of the same greater LA world, not too far around the same time. And it just changed everything. It was sort of the new wave thing was going on, but here were these guys just rocking the snot out of some roots amalgamums, and it just worked. I mean, it just really lit everything up for a lot of us in record stores and the rock and roll scene. And then Dave Alvin, went out on his own and began to issue these albums that just one after another were just gut punches. They were just like hymnal. They were just really amazing. I think I mentioned this author in relation to somebody else we talked about, but I'll invoke it again. Alvin reminds me of almost like if you took the blues and some really great songwriter stuff and meshed it into a John, it's like a John Steinbeck thing. There's this sort of darkness and this realistic lens on people and life. But then there's really sort of a hopeful, I'm seeking, I'm looking for something, I'm just trying to find my way, I'm figuring this out kind of a vibe. And if nothing else, the man's a storyteller, and an amazing one, both of his own journey, I'm sure, as well as characters that he conjures up from pastiche and people he knows, and it's really something. And on top of all that, he's a Godzilla, brilliant, blistering guitar player. I mean, it's just, he just brings it in an old school way that I like and appreciate. And I don't think many people can do to get today in the way that he does it. You know, there's a couple places he just takes a ride on this Ashgrove record, and I'm just like, yeah, that thing, that sound, for me and my generation, that's the shiznit, that's the thing, you know. And I really appreciate that.
Yeah, that's one of the things in my notes here when I was just revisiting this and thinking about him. And he has the classic, in my opinion, recognizable Strat sound. In terms of blues, probably kind of Chicago, kind of maybe Buddy Guy. I don't know who exactly. I'm not enough of a pure blues aficionado to kind of go exactly down that rabbit hole, but it's the classic Strat sound. And not only is it the sound though, it's more than just the sound. It's what he plays. He can kind of shred in all the right ways, but he also plays in a way to me that has nothing to prove to you, kind of, which I find very appealing. It's very soulful and kind of comfortable in its own skin. I think a lot of blues guys, there's such an emphasis on, can I shred you off the stage or not? A lot of times, even if it's kind of a subtext, it's maybe there a little bit. I don't really feel that with him. It's all just so soulful and articulate. And even the guitar on the cover of the album is just so boss, you know.
Old beat up white Stratocaster.
Yeah, and on the Ashgrove album, which is definitely my favorite, although all his Yep Rock albums to me are the ones that I kind of know the best. I listened a little bit to the Blasters, but on Ashgrove, there's a few songs, like I was looking at it, Black Sky, Out of Control, Sinful Daughter, are all like really riffy sort of, you know, if you're a fan of Cream or any like 60s rock or like certain Robert Cray songs, kind of where it just has those really tasty riffs, and then he just delivers, like you're saying, you know.
Yeah.
And then by the same, what's that? Go ahead.
Little Walter, I mean, who's you know, singer and a harp player, but that groove thing is, you know, I feel like he pulls some Little Walter groove, you know, into his mix, you know. I'm sure Dave I hope he's not upset with that, but it does have that sort of really shuffle, great, just get up and wiggle kind of groove to it.
Yeah, and he's such a great storyteller too. The whole album, I mean, the lyrics, as a songwriter myself who's always paying attention to lyrics, he opens with the title track, which again is very unassuming. He's just kind of telling a story. It's almost one of the least, it's the most unassuming song kind of on the whole record, the title track, the opening track. And you kind of listen and you're like, it's a little, I don't want to say underwhelming, but it's not the song. Let me put it this way. If you're an A&R guy or a record guy or a manager, you probably wouldn't put that song at the beginning, because right after it and the fourth track, 9 Volt Heart and Rio Grande are like FM radio hits. I mean, like certifiably ready. Like, I mean, they are, this is my opinion, but I feel the way. He starts off with the Ashgrove, and then at the end of that solo, at the end of that song, Ashgrove, at the beginning, his vocal delivery is just kind of telling you stories, kind of telling you his background. And then he takes a guitar solo that makes the whole song kind of, we're like, oh, I understand now. He's, you know, and you just feel that authentic. It's not only that it's just like that he's playing well, but it's just like there's some sort of an authentic thing that, you know, and then he hits you right after that. It's such a well-paced album.
Yeah, I'll jump in. I would almost disagree about the Ashgrove being whatever you said, understated. It's one of the things that caught me right when the needle dropped, if you will, on that track, because the Ashgrove is a club, and it was a renowned club, and it had a big influence on Dave, and a lot of us had heard of it through recordings and different things. And hell, I even have a Pharoah Sanders record, Elevation, that was recorded at the Ashgrove not long before it closed. Ashgrove was open from 1958 to 1973, and he references it. He's telling a specific story here.
Yeah.
You know, and it is 30 years. He talks about it, and this record came out in 2004, which, it was right 30 years that he was thinking about this and making this record, looking back at the close of the Ashgrove. And I really appreciate that. There's a lot of this cultural primary source that comes through Dave, I think, in his songs. This one and the 9-volt heart, the plastic radio, ties into a border radio that he wrote when he was in the Blasters about the Mexican radio rebeaming of all these radio stations, where no matter where you were, you could pick up these insanely killer radio stations because they had these giant towers just inside the Mexican border, and they would be all over the United States. And I had that experience, driving home late one night, a little bit worse for the wear, and I had my car radio on, and I was dialing around, and I hit something. I'm like, what the hell was that? And it was WLAC out of Nashville, and they were part of that network of that kind of culture, and they were beaming Junior Parker and Al Green and Ann Sexton and God knows what else. And it changed my life, and I appreciate him bringing those cultural reminders to the table in a rather enjoyable way in the music. And the 9-volt radio, hell, a lot of us, when I was a kid, I didn't have a stereo. My first thing was a little clock radio on the headboard of my bed, and then I had a little 1995 Panasonic. It was about this size with the speaker and the little dial up and down. And man, that line about the plastic 9-volt heart, you click it on and let the music start. And I remember laying in bed late at night, I was supposed to be asleep, and dialing in B.B. King and Otis Redding, Dock of the Bay. He talks about the staple singers
singing "I'll Take You There."
Take You There. God, if you ever heard that come over a cheap ass,
great, yeah,
sounds like $1 million on a cheap ass broken up car radio.
Yeah, that's anyway. A beautiful song. I've looked at that as a songwriter prepping for this episode and was reflecting on the fact that each of those 3 verses is about someone listening to the radio in a very meaningful or intimate way in different stages of life. The first verse is about the kid whose mom is going to find the daddy in the bar, and she leaves the kid in the car. And then the second verse is a young man and a girl having sex in a car, essentially listening to the Staples singers. And he has all these great references. And then the third verse is one of your favorite verses that I've heard you quote before, about long after midnight, listening to the evening news with his wife, doing the dishes. The third verse is just beautiful.
Yeah.
He has the other song, Everett Ruess, on there, which I looked up on Wikipedia and discovered was a poet in California that disappeared in his 20s.
Oh, yeah.
The song Black Haired Girl reminded me a lot of John Lee Hooker, who we were just talking about. The final song, Somewhere in Time, is an almost orchestral. I kind of had forgotten about that song. That was the one when I re-listened to it. I don't know if it's just because the last one I was like, wow, this is brilliant, And to bring it full circle to when you were just talking a minute ago about the Ashgrove, I know that it kind of relates to your own autobiography, in the sense of you used to sneak out and go see the African-American jazz and blues musicians in town that were performing. And what was it called? The Art Arc? What was the name of the club?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Got a fake license to get in there after I went the first time.
You had to get a fake driver's license, is that what you said?
Oh, yeah. They wouldn't let me sit at the table with my buddies, which were 1 year older than me.
So I think one of the reasons you might have specifically identified with that opening title track is he's kind of telling a story that was also kind of your story in a lot of ways.
Definitely, that's what I'm saying. And even this, he's there's a lot of his music where he's talking about, this is what I do. There's another level of identification with Dave Alvin for me. Maybe arrogant or precocious of me to say so, but I feel a kinship to him. We're born almost the same time. He's
really?
November 55 and I'm July 55, and we both went and did our thing. Now, he's a legendary musician and I've run a record store. That's what that is. But I understand that thing about, this is what I do and I'm doing it and I'm still trying to figure it out, and I'm going to get up and do it again in the morning, and I'm making my peace with it, and I'm walking the road trying to figure this thing out. he talks about that. I think it's in Black Sky, and he talks about it in Ashgrove that way. That hits really close to home for me. I mean, it really does. I feel like we sort of have been working way distant corners of the same room. He's out there on the road riffing and bringing the songs because that's what he's born to do, and I can't seem to do anything but get up in the morning and run a record store. Collect records, buy records, sell them, get off on it, think about them, look for them. And I appreciate it. He's that way too. He talks about all these musicians that he loves, and if you read his stuff, and there's a book he wrote, Any Rough Times Are Behind You Now. It's selected poems and writings, 1979 to 95. Back a little ways.
Wow.
And if you read his stuff, there's references to the music and the characters and the culture all throughout this poetry and these writings. And he's an astute scholar.
Yeah, it shines through on so many levels.
Yeah, he talks in the vernacular, but he's brilliant.
Yeah.
It's called New Highway, Selected Lyrics, Poems, Prose, Essays, and Eulogies and Blues. It comes out in May, and you darn tootin', I'm going to be looking for one.
Yeah. Wait, why don't you send us off this week with that thing you're reading from the back of the record there?
Oh, yeah. This is from the Blasters record, and it's called American Music, which was a song that used to drive me to distraction, and to this day just makes me want to jump up and down. It's we got the Louisiana Boogie and the Delta Blues. We got country swing and rockabilly too. We got jazz, country western, Chicago blues. That's the greatest music that you ever knew. It's American music, American music. It's American music. It's the greatest sound right from the USA. And that's so true. And we are very pleased that the Dave Alvins of the world and this Dave Alvin is out there bringing it to us.
Yeah, I second that. Amen. Check out Ashgrove. Check out all Dave Alvin. If you want to just check out one song, check out 9-Volt Heart. That song is,
oh boy,
it's a diamond. Because if you check that one out, you'll be listening to the whole record. I promise that much. And yeah, shout out to Yep Rock Records for making all this great music happen. And as always, go visit your local record store, go see your local bands. And yeah, Dave Alvin, number 21, Ashgrove.
Thanks, Dave.
There it is. Thanks, Dave.